Detroit. S- what is it? Yeah.
All right, welcome. We're just getting things started here in the Tacoma Museum of Glass today. Actually, this entire week, it's been a marathon week. A very special treat for us to have the wonderful drummer and composer and educator and master musician Ollie Jackson with us. So first and foremost, Ollie, thanks for joining us this entire week, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kandi. It's an amazing time in the Pacific Northwest. The weather has been amazing. So for those that don't know, I mean, I don't think you can get better. And I'm just somebody that's perused around the planet. This is a great place to be in this time of year, and really blessed and highly favored to just share the music with the people.
I always forget to do this. So before we also get started, thank you to our sponsors for helping make this possible. That, of course, is the Museum of Glass, Ted Brown Music, KNKX, Tacoma Creates, Edward Jones Financial Consultant Rick Gray, Titus Will Cars, and BCRA. They help us very much in making this possible, so we couldn't do it without them. And we couldn't do it without you guys either joining us in person or also online throughout the week, throughout the year. So if you're new to the series, also we do this typically every single week with a different guest artist. And so what we'll do is we'll conduct the interview for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open things up for questions. And in the meantime, if you have questions as we're talking here, feel free to jump in. We've actually done, I think, maybe 3 or 4 interviews all with Ollie covering lots of different topics. So we're just going to jump around and talk a lot about lots of different things, and including many things that we've discussed over this past week. We've done concerts. Let's see, we played in Lake Quinault. We played on Bainbridge Island. We played in Portland. We played in Seattle. We played in Bellevue. We played on Whidbey Island, all over the place, and lots of hours in the car talking about music and life in general and things that relate to that and being a musician or that don't. So lots of good things. And I would like to add, again, we've mentioned this before, but Ollie also has a wonderful online series, several different ones. There's See You at the Crib, See You at the Gig, and On the Record. Am I leaving anything out here?
Yeah, there's one that's called Bout It, and that means are you about it? Like somebody that's serious about something. So it's a little slang called Bout It, and it's generally features, and I basically profile great living musicians. And in the first series, it was a series of 7, and 2 of those people are no longer with us since I shot the series. So we're working on a whole nother season of Bout It, and that's like an ongoing thing just for our younger audience or just people in general that want to know more about the people that are very serious about the music, acoustic, organic musicians, and we basically just profile them and give a little anecdote, little biographical sketch about them, what makes their artistry unique or special, and that's it. Keep it moving. It's like a booster.
Well, speaking of projects and keeping things moving, there's a couple projects. You're active with many projects and different things, but one of the things is the group you've been involved with for quite some time with Omer Avital and Aaron Goldberg, the Yes Trio. You have a new album that's been recorded, but it's not released yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. We recorded the album towards the end of a tour in April 2022. It's going to come out on the Jazz and People label. It's based in France and based in Paris, France. It's all original music, but very interesting, quite diverse of styles. So you start talking about the canon of trios in jazz or piano trios. Normally the piano is the lead instrument or the leader in the trio. This trio is not really like that. Omer, Avital, and myself, we compose most of the material that we play, and it's very much an equal trio. The bass can lead, the drums can lead, the piano can lead. It's quite symbiotic, and so we like to capture that, and then also play in the very prominent styles of the piano trio. So, those could include Oscar Peterson's trio, Ahmad Jamal's trio, Sometimes Ornette Coleman Trio, even though it's not a piano, but in that kind of vein and style. Then, the great rhythm sections of Miles Davis. So his first one with Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones. Second one, Tony Williams, Herbie Hancock, and Ron Carter. So all of those styles. And then I can't leave out John Coltrane's great band with the trio of McCoy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, Elvin Jones, primarily. But for those that know or seeking that, but those are references for what we do in the Yes Trio.
Well, aside from that, so people looking forward to that. There's another album that is not, it's released only through your website. There's 2 live albums that you've done, which are great. It's the Big Brown Getdown Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, these are like 20 years old at this point, but the music is amazing. And it's yourself, it's Wynton Marsalis on trumpet, Robert Hurst on bass, and Aaron Goldberg on piano.
Yes, that's correct.
I know that we've discussed this at length. I already know the answer, but for people that don't know, the reason that you have not released the second one, and it's only available through your website, right?
Correct.
Can you talk about why?
Well, unless you've been sleeping for the last 20 plus years, you understand that the music industry, it exists in a different way. So for artists, generally, there's not so much reward for your music being recorded. The record labels generally benefit, and now since the proliferation of streaming, we like to call it stealing services. There's not a lot of royalties now. There's always an argument of, there's more exposure, more people hear it. But technically, I mean, if you want to get into the technical aspect of streaming, it's just someone hosts the actual audio or music on a server that's remote, that you don't actually have to download it, but you have access to it. But it's pretty much the same thing as if you bought the song and you listen to it however many songs. It's just such a reduced royalty on the music. And so this model has become very popular, and it makes people not want to buy them, or people feel like music is free, so to speak, or close to free. So for musicians, when you're producing music, it costs a lot of money, especially if you're producing music in an organic sense, or you have to actually hire musicians, or you actually have to hire arrangers or composers or producers to make a project happen. There are a lot of expenses attached to it, and then to just give the music away is like, that's not a business model at all. So the reason why I've started to do it and kind of put my catalog, so to say, on my own platform is because the people that want to access your music, they can just go directly to the artist. And there are a few pop artists that started to do that. I know Prince was a champion of that, where he was very vocal about people accessing the music directly from the artist, so from him. So that is very important, and this is important for our young people, because quick money is not always good money, as they say in the street. It's short. So long term, the investment for the artists into their own music, and now because of technology, for those in the digital music creation space, is different because there's just less cost associated with producing music. So you don't have to pay a whole band. You could produce a whole album on a phone, and you could release it digitally like whenever you want. But the caveat is marketing, promotion and marketing. So marketing and promotion, and generally pop music now today, music is basically given away for free as marketing to sell other things. You're not actually buying the music. You're buying whatever they're wearing in the video, whatever products they're selling, or leveraging a larger audience base for the artist to then leverage that into whatever it is, acting career, any business venture, other things. So for organic music, the audience is smaller. And generally that audience is also willing to pay for the music or the art that they like, as opposed to just going through a service. And there's more, you could say, more visceral with connecting with the artist on a grassroots level. So those are part of the reasons. But for me, like, why give my music away or give it to a service and they take 30% off the top for just hosting your music and they didn't do anything? So
Switching gears, but along the same lines of writing music and composing music. So for many people that don't know, or they may know, oh, Ollie Jackson, he's a great drummer. But, I mean, as you've said many times, you're a musician first and a drummer second. And you've done lots of different writing for many different formats. You've done, obviously, writing and arranging in small groups and ensembles and playing in other people's bands who were brilliant writers and arrangers on the spot. Or I remember you told a story, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I want to get into other commissions and composers too, but or things that you do. But when you were in Dee Dee Bridgewater's band, I believe you told me this story years ago, that you guys would arrange or rearrange songs every single night. Like one night you'd play a song and the section would be in 4/4 and then the bridge would go to 6/4 just to keep things moving along. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yes, I can. I'll try to illuminate it. So for musicians that work together on a regular basis, there's a certain level of familiarity and comfortability. And when you start to understand it, and the material that you play, if it lends itself to be opened up or to be explored, and people are on the same page or understanding, that's a great catalyst to move things in a different direction. And generally it has to do with your imagination and similar references of music or knowledge of music. So if everyone's like reading books, if everyone read the same book, they were like, oh, I get the gist of that. I see what John Steinbeck is talking about here. Or like, I see what Hemingway is talking about here. I understand what Shakespeare is saying in Hamlet. So all of these references give people common ground to then explore and says, oh, well, that's a reference to this, and then we could do that. And it happens on the fly. As long as, you're in an environment where people are open. You could do it, in the classical world, people think you're like, man, how do you guys do this? Like magical, because they're used to there's a very specific structure or the notes that are on a page, and you don't, there's no real variation. Maybe a little bit in interpretation, but no variation. So in the quote unquote jazz context, that's where the music happens, or the creativity, or the art and the improvisation. All of those things happen in that space. But it's, you have material that's fertile ground for that.
Thank you. All right. So aside, and I'm glad you mentioned classical, because like I said, aside from small ensemble work, you also arrange things for solo drums, like solo drum pieces, or duos, trios, quartets. You've arranged big band music for Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. And for what you were saying, that environment, everyone in the band writes. So in order for your pieces to get performed, your pieces are basically in competition with everybody else's pieces, and the better ones get performed, correct?
Something like that. I mean, it's competitive. I mean, people think of like, oh, well, you're just artists and you can just do whatever you want. It's like, man, there's standards. It's like if we went on the basketball court and we were playing people that all they did was play basketball 5 hours a day for like 15, 20 years. I mean, you're not gonna stand a chance. So it's the same with music or arranging. You have guys that are very serious about arranging and they take it very serious or have very strong concepts. You don't want to bring in material that's just not together. And this is for whoever hears this. Like, if you are an arranger, like, there's certain things that are important, that are simple, just that your parts are copied correctly. Like when you get with high level musicians that are just used to reading parts, and this is almost like it's more rare now that it even exists. But if you bring in music that's not formatted correctly, or it's not transposed right, or you have too many bars in a system, or it's not, it doesn't, it's difficult to read, it just lowers the chances of your music being played correctly off the bat. So it's a it's a small thing, but it can be a big thing, and it's time. So a lot of times is in the larger the ensemble. So I always say this: every time you add one person to an ensemble, there's more music that has to be written. So if you're playing a duo, 2 people, you can improvise and make up stuff. 3 people, you don't really need music. 1 horn, maybe a little bit of music. Once you have 2 horns, 3 horns, every time it's just more music because you have more people that you have to organize on when they're playing or when they're not playing. So important to copy the music well. That's very important. Secondly, it's okay to not write a lot of complicated things, especially the more people you add to an ensemble, because you just complicate it, and getting 2 people on the same page is much easier than getting 20 people on the same page. Trust me. I have a lot of experience with that.
You have a lot of experience with composing and writing and arranging and producing, but also performing experience with just wide arrays of different styles of music. So, for example, in your bio alone, there's the Lincoln Center and Wynton Marsalis, Joshua Redman, Kenny Garrett, James Carter, Branford Marsalis, tons of like steeped in jazz and the tradition. But then there's also Willie Nelson, Aretha Franklin, the Platters, Norah Jones. So how much of that in working in those contexts is written versus unwritten?
Yeah, just correction. The Spinners, not the. Yeah.
I retract my
No,
statement.
that's all good. It's all good. So people that might know the Platters, they be like, the Platters, really? Every setting is a little different, but the fundamental principles are almost always the same. Generally, less is more. Generally, stick to the function of what you're doing. Try not to be too ambitious, or know when you be thoughtful about when you're ambitious musically on any level, whether it's arranging, composing, playing, performing, and read the room, read the ensemble. I remember I did some shows with the great Bobby McFerrin, and I always watched how he could do very simple things extremely well, and how he'd have so much command over those things that would make it have an impact on how you would be in service to how you would play. So less is sometimes more, like almost all the time. And then if you set up the less, when you actually do something out of the ordinary, it even shines that much more. So, he was great with that. Very, very thoughtful. There's lots of ways, you could do that. That's a whole nother conversation. But those are my general basic takeaways. Less is more.
There was something you said when we were driving down to Portland that I thought was a very good point for people to be in that frame of mind before you start playing in a setting where you're improvising together as a group, where a lot of people get in and they practice their thing and they're soloing and whatever they're going to be doing, their concepts. And instead of going in with the mindset of what can I do, it's what can we do? And then when you think about it through that lens, you're thinking about how can we work together as an ensemble to play and create these things. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, number one is you have to be very confident on what you can and cannot do individually. So when you're playing with other people, you shouldn't really be thinking about what you're doing. You should be thinking about what's going on in the ensemble. You should, like at a job, if you worked in an office, you know what your role is, but you're always figuring out what the roles of the other people are and how we work together. Like if I'm responsible for getting you the data, getting the numbers, so I get the numbers, and then I get the numbers to you, and then you do what you have to do with those numbers. But my job is to get you the numbers. So if I'm thinking about, oh, well, I want to use the data like this and that, and I'm not getting the numbers, you mess up the flow of the team. So now, after I get you the numbers, then maybe, okay, that's different. But if my responsibility is getting you the numbers, you got to get the numbers. And so sometimes people are in their heads, and that has to do with lack of confidence or preparation. So if you're not prepared, I mean, I use sports analogies all the time because it's just easy. It's more baked into our culture. Sometimes when I talk about music, a lot of people might take it's esoteric. It's a little bit, but not really. Like it's like an athlete. Everyone can see if they're fast. Like this person's fast. They run fast. They stop watching. He ran from point A to point B this fast. It doesn't lie. With music, I mean, maybe with vocalists, people can see if you hear someone sing and they sing really well in tune, or they have a very pleasant voice. It's like you can like, wow, she has a nice voice, or they sing in tune, or if somebody's singing out of tune, you be like, oh, they're off pitch. It's very clear. In the context of jazz or improvised music, those things still apply. It's just that maybe people aren't familiar with the song or they're not familiar with other elements. But if you ask other musicians that are familiar with if somebody plays in tune, if they have a good sound, if they play attentive to what's going on musically, those things are very evident. So I always say sound, rhythm, and awareness. And awareness can be many things. Awareness to your place in the tune, awareness to what's going on musically, and all of those, those elements. Practicing is very different than performing, because practicing, you control the environment and it's not on the spot. Once somebody counts a tune off, there's no going back. It's like you train has left the station, no do-overs. So you have to adapt. Which there's pressure with that. So with that pressure comes you have to be super prepared, because you don't get a do-over. You're out there. So I feel that people could be more prepared about the material and be thoughtful about what they're doing. So when they're in an environment with other people, they're just attentive to what's going on, as opposed to them focusing so much on themselves. Because music is a collective. It's not like, oh, I'm just doing me. It's like team sports. I bring up the relationship with world football because you have 11 guys out there that are individuals. They're all individuals and they all have very specific skills, and you bring all these individuals in the context of a group. So you're not going to ask your center back to dribble everybody on the team and then go score a goal. That's not really his role. Now, he could do that, and that has happened, but it's not as common. So, it's like your goalkeeper. He's not going to score a goal from your own goal. It's just not generally his role, and no one expects him to do that. Now, they do expect him to block shots that come on goal. It's like a drummer. You're not going to ask him to play the melody of a tune. Now, he could, depending on who he is. He could do that, but that's generally not his role. Now, if the dynamics of the ensemble, or somebody's playing super loud, or the drums are playing so loud that it's glaring, you're like, what the heck is going on? That's, they're responsible for that, or setting the dynamics of a tune, or the vibration, or the sentiment, or the attitude, the emotional foundation of a song. So if that's all out of balance, the rest of the, how are other people? We're playing a ballad and the drums are like bashing it's like, it's a little out of context. So these are little things, but they're big things. I don't know if that answered all of the question, but
that's pretty sufficient. I want to jump back because you had mentioned classical music. Now, many people don't know, aside from the stuff you do in the quote-unquote jazz world, you've also written many ballets. You've just you completed your 8th ballet, correct?
Yes.
And it's about to premiere with the New York Philharmonic, no?
Actually, it's premiering in New York City. It's a part of a commission from the Joyce Theater, which is known for dance. It's a dance theater. It's like one of the most respected dance theaters in New York City, if not the top one, but it's pretty significant in the dance world. So I composed or collaborated with the fantastic Hope Boykin, who was a principal dancer with Alvin Ailey, American Dance Theater, for over 20 years. Man, I don't know how many collaborations. It's like 6 or 7 collaborations for us. And this piece is entitled "The States of Hope," and it's about different emotions. So angry, conformity, cynicism, being since what's the other one? Oh, determined. So there's a bunch of different states of the human condition that this ballet touches on, and these are all different characters. So I composed a piece based on themes for each one of these characters, and there's different iterations of these themes in the piece. And the ensemble of for the piece was a quintet, jazz quintet. Now every ballet I kind of change the instrumentation or have a different approach. So each ballet that I've actually composed, the instrumentation is all different. It's never the same, and the approach to the piece is all different based on what the theme of the piece is. And since Hope and I we've developed a very organic and symbiotic kind of work relationship, because movement and rhythm like go hand in hand. That goes back to the beginning of time. So, dance is generally to rhythm, and great drummers if you go into all of the West African traditions of the music, or all over Africa, dance is also, so you dance to rhythm or grooves that have some kind of symbolic or some kind of meaning inside of the culture. And then along with that, the improvisation part is certain dancers, they dance and improvise to what's going on in the rhythm, and the lead drummer marks their dance or follows them. So the dancer's following the rhythm, and then the lead drummer is marking the improvised dance piece. So there's some of that tradition in these ballets as well. So even though I think it's a French derived word, it's a dance. So whether it's in the classical, or it became obviously popular in the European classic cultural evolution, but here in modern dance, or however people label it, it's still just dance. I'm not so big on labels. I'm big on traditions, but the labels, they give us a context, but they don't actually explain everything.
Well, it's funny. I don't think I'm far off the mark. When most people hear the word ballet, they think, Swan Lake, Tchaikovsky, Dance of the Sugar-Plum Fairies. When they hear this music, and it's very groove-oriented, I think it would turn a lot of people on their heads to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And in the eight ballets that you've written, are they more coming through that lens of more groove-oriented or more classical? Speaking of labels.
I think everything is based on groove. So whether you call it classical or not, just sound in general is based on vibration. So that's movement, that's rhythm. So every frequency is a rhythm. We don't think about it that way because the frequencies are, like high or like a pitch or note, like A440. It's a frequency, but it's rhythm. It's a vibration that creates these sounds or these pitches or these tones. So everything is based around rhythm. Now you start getting into the rhythm of drums and the tradition of rhythms throughout the world. I try to use rhythms that identify a certain kind of mood, emotion, vibration. And so you'll hear that in a lot of the different pieces. Every piece is a different rhythm, different tempo, different kind of riff or approach or scheme. So some things are bass line oriented, some things are melody oriented, some things are collective or interlocking rhythms, like they call them polyrhythms. And generally there's just the term of a groove is a group of rhythms that work in conjunction with each other to create a groove. And so whether you think of it or not, that's what it is. So any songs like Hollywood Swinging, was it Cool in the Game? Dee do be do be do do be dee do 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 shibby do dee da dee be dee don't don't beep beep boom chicka doom doom. Like all of those rhythms, everything that everyone is playing, they're all working conjunction. No one is playing the same parts, but everyone has a space. So all of those things together, it sounds very complete and very full. I'm not the keeper of all of or being an expert in the derivation of all of these things, but it's definitely a very prominent thing in a lot of African music. So interlocking rhythms and riffs or motifs that fit together that create a whole. And there's also the scale of, in harmony or in Western music, the more harmony you have, the more space you need. So if you have a lot of dense harmony, you need space around it to hear all of the harmony. It's hard. It sounds like cacophony if you hear a lot of harmony or dense harmony and it's moving around a lot. It sounds crazy. You can do it, but it's hard to decipher what's actually going on. And that applies with rhythm. The more rhythm you have, the more space you need, or, your harmonic thing should be more simple. So the more rhythm, less harmony. The more harmony, more space. So these is like a sliding scale that you're always playing with. And then melodies, which is kind of, in the modern era of, in general, all over more popular music, there's a dearth in quality of melody. And when I say quality of melody, is like, is it singable? Is it something you could follow? Is it recognizable? And repetition. So repetition is something, and that's also rhythm. So I go back to this riff. Anytime you have repetition, it connects someone. It's like if you were, I want to meet the parent that told their kid to clean their room one time and they did it. It's like if you want your kid to clean their room, you're probably going to say that like 500 times before and then they start to tune you out. But somewhere in there, they know how you say clean your room, if you're serious or not, from repetition. Or like any language, it's the repetition of hearing, how are you, ¿Cómo está usted? Ça va bien.
I was going to ask you, speaking of, now you mentioned you're a third generation musician. Your father was a bass player, your mother was a pianist, and I didn't know about, so who on whose side was musicians as well?
Both. So my grandfather was a violinist. He's actually has Ukrainian roots. He grew up in the tradition of European classical music in Michigan. And then on my father's side, my great uncle and my grandfather were all like Appalachian blues musicians that came from the South and migrated north. So the story about my grandfather, Mr. O.C., that's how that was his name, O.C. Jackson. They said he traveled with a frying pan and a guitar. And so he would cook and play. And they would jam there. I have pictures of them. Like, there's not a lot of pictures, but there are a few pictures of them like playing. My uncle or great uncle on fiddle and my grandfather playing guitar. So I grew up in the quote unquote jazz tradition. So when people, everybody goes like, oh yeah, well I went to school. Like all these people that go to music school to learn how to play music. That's not really how you learn how to play. Like you just going to school. It's like you touch on the outskirts of something. Now you can learn a lot of things about the music, but playing is playing. Like, do you think, and I love this, which is really interesting because I keep making these sports analogies. No one ever talks about like all of these top high school recruits that end up, they go to these big college programs like Division 1, UW or Washington State or wherever, Kentucky, Duke. Where did they really learn how to play? In the street, in the neighborhood. They didn't learn how to play in the institution. They didn't go like, oh, I went to basketball academy and they taught me all these skills. Like, no, they learned by playing. Like most people learn. I mean, I think just education in general, where we are in the world, I think education, it needs an overhaul. Because we've been kind of indoctrinated into like, oh, you have to go to a school and they give you a piece of paper that says you know how to do this. It's like, well, if you really wanted to learn how to, or let's say, do anything, and you started apprenticing with the person that was actually doing it, you would learn much faster and be far more, let's say, how can I say, vested and educated in that field as opposed to anything else, like being thrown into the fire. I mean, and I think moving forward with as fast as our world is changing, you see more of that. Like we've not caught up to the internet or technological age. We're like living in a time of, we have an education system of a world that doesn't exist now. I don't know if everyone agrees with that, but that's what I see. Sometimes they say musicians are seeing into the future. Like I might sound crazy now, but in 10 years, they were like, hey, man, he was on to something. I said that about the recording industry. People didn't believe, like now, people look at hard disk recording, like, Pro Tools, like you have a computer that records, everything. You have non-destructive editing and all of that. I said that when people were still using ADAT cassette or like 8-track ADATs or multi-track, guys, it's, man, you're crazy. It'll never get like that. I'm like, not only will it get that way, but look at it now. AI, you don't even need anyone. You have a whole orchestra that's AI and it'll be better than it's incredible. But so technology has moved, and I'm not saying it's better than a real orchestra, but the amount of time and how technology has changed the way the world is or moves. There's no substitute for people having knowledge, and there's no substitute for work or hours. I mean, I know I'm going off if you have other questions, but it just makes me think about another conversation or topic about DJs. I was walking through the airport not too long ago, a couple years ago, and I travel with a really small keyboard to compose, and computer and some little gear in a backpack. So these people, I could see they were like getting excited, like they were like the TSA people. This is actually funny. So they're getting excited, and I don't know what I was wearing, maybe something similar to how I'm dressed now. So they said like, wow, like they knew me, or like they were like curious. They were like, so you do music? I said, kind of. They were like, yo, so like you a DJ? I was like, no, I'm a composer. They go, what's that? That's just so DJs in our world now, and this is not personal attack on anyone that's a DJ. For those that don't know, it's like, it's not that some can't create music, but it's ultimately you're playing music that has already been created by other people, and you're just playing it. And those people are celebrated. Some of them paid lots of money, far more money than the people that actually make music on the spot. And they're celebrated in our culture, in our society, in a way that it basically just, no one cares. Or sometimes DJs create their own music, but generally from sampling music and mixing it together and putting it together. And that's cool. That's great. I'm not saying that it's bad. However, it gives a false perception of how music is actually created. So somebody like, it's like I know, like now, I mean, now it's really crazy because like real artists, you know, you could get on ChatGPT and say, create me a work that's inspired by Van Gogh, a little bit of, you know, Rembrandt, and a splash of Jackson Pollock. And it'll, boom, 3 seconds. And it'll be super creative and super bad. And it's like, like what is, you know, an artist to create a work like that? You know, it could take them years. They could work on a piece for years to create something. So what does it say about society and what is the value of art? So let's say Hollywood Swinging, you know, Kool and the Gang, somebody samples that and throws something else on top of it. And they were like, yeah, I'm a producer. Look at my work. It happened recently. Ed Sheeran got sued with and I don't know why they love sampling Marvin Gaye. A few years back before that, it was Robin Thicke and Pharrell with another Marvin Gaye tune. But it's okay, like I'm saying, to be inspired by certain things, but it's like you can't come up with a your own creative idea. It's gotta be what someone else did. I mean, I'm inspired by lots of people and I've studied them. And if I play, you could say, wow, that sounds like Max Roach, or that sounds like Elvin Jones or something, but it still sounds like me at the end. You'd be like, oh, that's him. It's like how you use language. It's like putting a patent on words. It's we all have the same words. It's how one person might use the words other than another person. You got the whole writer strike in Hollywood right now too, of people not fairly being compensated or whatever, like all of these shifts. So I get it, like producing a show. So people ask me, oh, Ali, why haven't you produced more shows, you know, on these series that we were talking about that I start producing on YouTube? I said, man, the writing, to do one show that's 12 minutes or so long, I have to script, or to see you at the gigs, I have to write them. And the writing could take you a week. And that's working on it, like every day, like just to write it and then edit it and then be like, oh, this works, this doesn't work. So it takes time. It's like somebody that goes to a restaurant and eats a meal or a nice meal. You eat the meal in 15 minutes, you be like, yeah, it was pretty good. It's like, man, somebody who's like spent all day preparing the meal for you to just be like, yeah, it was cool. Like, let's see you try and do that meal. Be like, no, I'm not gonna be doing that. So it's just perspective. And I think we just, as humans, because things have become more and more automated and easy or more accessible, we take for granted like the things that make them unique or special. That's just in general. So I don't know.
I have several more questions, but to be fair to the audience online and in person, I'm going to open things up for questions. So if you have any questions for Ollie or myself at this time, let us know. Yes, you.
I have a question. You mentioned about that you don't label stuff and you like more tradition. So what do you think from your perspective, which traditions are kind of start get like fade away and you would wish we like musicians will keep them more? And in general, about like what transitions do you think they should be always like foundation, never forget?
So I'm going to try to paraphrase this as best I can. As a musician, you see some traditions that are starting to fade away, and what traditions do you think should be preserved?
Should be like as a foundation and never been forget.
Should be, what traditions should serve as a foundation and should never be forgotten? That's the first part of the question, right? And we'll get to the second one.
Well, I mean, you could speak to it in any tradition. You're from Ukraine, right? So what's a tradition that you guys have that like traditional, like all Ukrainians can agree? Let's say just food.
Some weddings that I grew up, that I've seen, like traditional weddings, are not as traditional anymore, and it's kind of sad because in society it's not cool anymore to do like it was used to. So that's why my question was about what the music tradition
Right.
you have to, as musicians, you have to keep up.
Well, for one, playing in time, having a good sound, uh, listening. I mean, listening is like a dying art. Like people are just about themselves, and I think that has to do like that. That's about like just the culture, social media culture, vanity culture. Like people have lost sight of like it's just about me and promoting myself. It's like no, it's like to play music, you have to listen twice as much as you're actually playing, at least. Like this has nothing to do with any genre. That's just period. And if you're playing loud as hell, doesn't mean that means everyone plays louder. Like, wait a minute, how about we go the other way? How do we play at a dynamic level that we can all communicate? It's like I go to shows and it's like if I came in a room right now and I have this mic on and I just start yelling at the top of my lungs to you guys, you would be like, what's wrong with this guy? That's what it's like going to a show for me. Really. So that makes it tradition. And we can talk about death metal and we could talk about like all kind of other genres. Like that's an element of the music, but it's not that way all of the time. Yeah, and it's expressing a certain kind of energy or emotion for that. But is that all the time? So I think the traditions of just humanity and how we treat each other. It's like people on the road driving crazy. It's like, why are you on the road if you're going to choose to not be respectful of the other people on the road? It's like you're the only person driving on the road. Last I looked on I-5, there's a gazillion people on the road.
We've been driving a lot. A lot.
So, yeah, so like just like these are, you talking about traditions. Like in the jazz tradition, I mean, that's just a whole rabbit hole. I'm working on a piece on that. It's just too many things to cover because jazz has just become just a label that can mean anything. It's like labels in society. It's like, oh, you're Ukrainian, so whatever stereotype anyone's like. It could be true, it could be not, but does it actually have to do with you? It's like somebody says, oh, well, you're a jazz musician. You think you're better than her. Did I say that? No. Oh, it's like programs in schools. The jazz programs always get treated like the stepchild of music some kind of way. But generally by people that don't understand the art form or they've not made an investment. That's the big thing. Now, there you go. The tradition of investment. That's what I see that's the biggest problem in our world. And it can relate to definitely in music, but investment. If you don't invest in knowing about something, you're just going to be ignorant to it. Like when you go buy let's say that's important, like a big purchase or a house. Somebody buys a house. They say it's one of the biggest investments in your life, right? Everybody agrees with that? Yeah, somewhat. But for the wrong reason. People think the investment is monetary. It's actually not about the money. You think about if you have kids, what schools, if I'm sending them to public schools, what's my commute to work? Time. What's the quality of life or the environment I want to be by the water? Do I want to be on the hill? Do I want to be in the city? Do I want to be like, those are the things. So it's the investment of where you spend your time. So some people will pay, there's no amount of money that they will not spare to be in the environment that makes them feel most comfortable. So in other aspects of our lives or just in the world, people are just thinking about money as opposed to the quality or the quality of their experience. So if you're letting that drive your choices, and this is with music, so I can relate it back to music. I want to be popular, but you play crappy music. So you don't care about the quality of the music you play. You just want to be popular. So I'm willing to compromise playing good music to be popular. And you see that play over and over again now where people don't even care. And if you bring it up, you're the bad guy for even saying anything. Or you're dismissed. That's what's happening. It's always been happening, but now it's just magnified. So those are things to always think about. I would say stand firm on your belief of whatever the traditions that have value, because traditions have value. Once a tradition dies, it's no longer a tradition. It's not replaced with something else. A tradition is a tradition. It's like humanity. If we stop reproducing, then there is no tradition of any more humans. That's just facts. It's not my philosophy, or you just can't argue it. If you stop reproducing people, or if people start to become clones, you've killed a tradition. So it's no longer the same. Somebody said, I don't remember who said it, but they were saying, yeah, there's a new tradition in jazz, or a new tradition. I was like, well, then it's not jazz then. That's like if I said, okay, now we watching basketball, but I say now you could just, we use a different ball. You don't have to dribble. You can foul anybody anytime you want. It's a different sport. It's not, it's cool. It could be whatever it is, but it's not that. Just like calling an elephant a mouse. It's like, you could call it that, but that's not what it is for those who know. But if you can convince enough people to make an elephant a mouse, then those that don't know, and you eliminate all these people that know an elephant for it being an elephant and justify it, then that's where we have a problem. And I think, unfortunately, I don't know what your experiences are. There's a lot of things that are starting to move more in that direction. We're redefining what something is. It's like calling a drum set, a keyboard, or calling rappers musicians.
What was the second half of your question? Are there any other questions? Either in, yes.
Second, probably the small one. What probably hard, but top 3 albums must know, analyze, must have on your shelf, top 3 jazz albums.
So the question is, what are top 3 jazz albums that you must have on your shelf to study and know and memorize? That's a tough one, but
Yeah, well, you could change them. They might change from day to day. How about I'm gonna change them up. So Duke Ellington, trying to think if it's on a box set. I'll tell you, it's like the first album I ever heard. It's early Duke Ellington, like early 30s. It's on the Time Life box set. They play like some of everything. Mood Indigo, Coco. It's classic. Early Duke. So any early Duke Ellington. That's one. 2, Ahmad Jamal live at the Pershing. And 3, Kenny Garrett, Black Hope. That's just because I wanted to give you something the beginning, something that had a huge influence on a whole movement of quote unquote cool jazz. So, you know, like Miles Davis, Paul Desmond, you know, all of the kind of cool, smooth jazz. But Ahmad Jamal was like a precursor to all of those styles early. So that's why I chose that record. And then I chose Kenny Garrett Black Hope because he's an amalgamation of somebody who's living now today that knows a lot of the tradition. And that record, there's great playing on it. He has an elder, Joe Henderson is on that record. The late Kenny Kirkland is on that record. Brian Blade is on the record. And who's playing bass? Is it Charnett? I think it's Charnett Moffett, who's no longer with us. So you have a lot of people that come from the tradition and are part of it. And the record has a lot of different stylistically. You know, so you kind of got some rhythm and blues-esque things. You got straight ahead stuff. You got blues. You got burnout. It's a mix of a lot of things. And it's a very, how can I say, under the radar recording. And I think that recording came out in 92, maybe 91, 92. So there you go. Three records. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Yes. So the question is, what do you think has done the greatest amount of harm to musicians and being a musician as a profession? Is it streaming services or something else, in your opinion?
I would have to agree that the stealing services are up at the top. There are lots of other variables, but it's at the top. And I just want you guys to think about this, and I'd love for anyone to challenge me on it, or if you have a difference of opinion, I'm completely open because I want to learn. Because music has become so available, one, because the technology has made it very easy for people that are not trained as a musician to create sound and manipulate sound or sample and all of that. And you have a technology that has made it possible, or the laws that they've approved from Napster, where you just had file sharing. You've made it where the price of music has just come down. So because people don't actually pay for it, I don't know if you all have thought about this, but it's in the human psyche somewhere, like subconsciously. You don't ascribe value to it. And it's very different than putting on the amount of effort that goes into a classical recording or symphony orchestra recording and that of somebody producing or releasing a hip hop record are drastically different. The cost of somebody doing a hip hop album on their phone or like on their computer at home versus someone actually having to produce a symphonic recording is different. And you mean to tell me they're the same price? I mean, as I say, school me. You tell me how that works. And the same level of effort or the same level of feeling and humanity and thought that went into it. And I'm not disrespecting a hip hop album or the lyricist on it, but okay, you have a lyricist and a producer that does the beat versus 100-piece orchestra, however many copyists, however many arrangers, however many engineers, all the people associated with creating the music, conductor. It's just completely different. And so if those things, if people are absorbing that, and then we're not even getting into what is marketed and promoted and how can I say, deemed or giving an impression that it's important because it's popular. So now we have the thing of not doesn't necessarily mean it's good. It's because it's popular and they're dumping money towards something to make it seem to give it some kind of prestige. So those are two. That's a whole nother element. But I will say, distilling services have definitely devalued all music. And technology has made it possible for people that are not really musicians to get into music. And music is the easiest thing to co-opt to leverage to something else. So you have a lot of these artists, and it's not even a personal attack on them. But you have your Nicki Minaj's, your Cardi B's, and all of the rest of them that have found a niche where they're entertainers and they're selling something that's wrapped in sex, wrapped in decadence, or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of satanic rappers and demonic stuff that being pushed and popular, and people are absorbing this. It's just like eating food. So what you put in your system sonically and what you put in your system spiritually, you're ingesting it. It's the same with food. If you eat messed up food every day, at a certain point, it's going to catch up with you. So I say that with music and art, but there's a multitude of things, but devaluing it from a monetary value standpoint, that has happened. And so people, they think nothing of it. Just the average person. I'm not necessarily speaking to the people that are here right now, but if you just can get anything and have access to any song you want at any moment in time and you don't have to pay for it, why would you? Does it have value to you, really? I find it really interesting. Just another point to that point. You go to a concert, say it's a hip hop concert. You know, pop concerts are a show. So, you know, you got a light show, you got dancers, so it's entertaining. I get it. But somebody's paying $2,000 for a ticket to go to that. And you're like in row 562. And you could go see some live musicians that's right up close and personal. It's organic. It's like eating organic, like out of the garden. And people don't want to pay $20. I'm just going like, wow. Like what's going on? I mean, do people actually think about this stuff? I don't know. You tell me. It's a question to be asked to everyone. Like it's like a human question for anyone and everyone. I don't know.
Well, we're getting short on time, and I'm going to be selfish and ask the last question. If you have questions, you can always put it on the live stream after the fact in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them. But so you've played with some of the greatest musical minds on the planet for a very long time, vast career, and you've also seen the highs and seen the music business now, the lows of the lows. In your opinion, after seeing things and traveling the world and dealing with education and musicians in the music business, what are some solutions to address these problems to change what's happening?
Support Kareem Kandi World Orchestra. I mean, he's doing it. I mean, this right now. I mean, I'm not the only person that has these experiences or these perspectives or viewpoints. I think there are many of us out here, and we're all trying to figure out what are the solutions. And I always say it's like going younger and younger and younger. Like you have to go younger. So they have an idea and an understanding of what it is that's out here. Because it's like anything, it morphs, it changes. It's just like the recording industry. We were talking about that earlier, and I was just thinking about it was very difficult when I was a young musician, say in my teenage years, to get studio time because it was very expensive. You know, to get an hour in the studio would be like $200 back then, which that's like the equivalent of $1,000 an hour now, or close to it, like $700 an hour to go in this. Like, so if you weren't good, nobody was going to invest in you going to the studio. And so I was talking about technology or musicianship. If you messed up a take, or you know, you played a song, especially being a drummer or a rhythm section player, like that was unacceptable. Like you had 1 or 2 times, and if you messed up, they'd be like, next. You off that gig, they would be like the next person, because they didn't have the time or the money or resources for you to get it together. So all of these things, how could I say, is the value in excellence. And I think the trophy culture has killed a lot of stuff. Like everyone's great. Everyone wants to be praised. It's like this generation of younger people now, like they have no backbone. They don't know what failure is, or they can't even deal with any failure. So if they're not being praised, they can't handle it. So I think it's creating an environment that failing is okay. It's okay to fail. Like that's a part of the process. You're not going to get it the first time. You might not get it the 100th time, but that's a part of it in the conditioning of people striving for excellence and having real models of what is excellent and striving for those things. So that's part of the solution, or just giving information. So my contribution is doing these series, See You at the Gig, About It, On the Records, where you give analysis of things that are tangible musical things or cultural things that actually have weight, that are real, that might not get talked about. And I feel like these conversations, these kind of talks, these kind of perspectives are important to help guide a holistic perspective of what's happening in the world. I mean, I talk to young musicians now, they have no clue of what recording the 2-inch tape is in the studio. They look at me like, what? They have no idea of like, yeah, you have to play this whole take all the way through. There's no overdubbing. Oh, you cracked a note on that? Sorry. Now we got to do a whole nother take. Like, so, and long-term achievement. Like, you're not going to be good in a year. You might not be good in 5 years. But maybe in that 7th year, you'll be like, oh, it's getting there. We see some progress. So anything good is not going to be instant. And I feel like that's something that we can constantly reaffirm and share and bring that to the forefront so people stay invested. I think it's just microwave society and all things. So we got to get back to our roots. And if we don't, we're going to lose a part of what makes us human, because we're all like first generation cyborgs. We are all that. The next thing in our lifetime, I guarantee you, they will be talking about chipping people and be like, yeah, instead of getting a new phone, I got the new chip. I can remember I have access to 10,000 books. It sounds crazy, but that's the direction we're headed. So the organic element of humanity and feeling, and I hope I'm transmitting this, like that is what's special about humanity, is that there is no such thing as perfect. That's what's perfect, that there is no perfect. That is the perfect thing about humans, that there is no perfect. That's all I got.
Just remember that when I solo today. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for the interview. We're going to take a very short break and then come and do a performance. Have a nice round of applause for Ollie Jackson, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
And as always, whether you're joining us online via the live stream or in person, if you enjoy these things that we do, the majority of our programming throughout the year is 100% free and open to the public. So if you want to help support what we're doing, there's suggested donation jar here at the front of the stage, or all the information about how you can donate online at the beginning of the post if you're joining us online. And thank you so much. We'll see you again soon. Thank you, Ali, for joining us.
Thank you, Kareem Kandi, KKWO.